Yeah.
So my name is Morna Gerard and I am interviewing Zoe Stephens for Georgia State University's Women's March Oral History Project. The date is February 17th, 2017, and the interview is taking place in special collections at the Georgia State University Library. Okay, Zoe, can you tell me what year you were born and where you were born?
I was born in the year 2002, and I was born in Atlanta, so, yeah.
Where in Atlanta?
I'm not exactly sure which hospital. I think Piedmont, though.
Okay. What neighborhood do you live in?
I used to live in Edgewood for most of my early life, and then we moved to the Philippines for 3 years. Yeah. And then once we moved back, we moved to Decatur, so, and we're still living there now.
Okay. Can you describe your family's political leanings?
Very liberal. I've typically always been surrounded by kind of progressive, open-minded people, which has really had an impact on me, obviously. But my dad's side of the family is actually quite conservative, so family holidays are quite tense with them. But within my immediate family, it's always been pretty liberal and kind of democratic.
Have you ever been involved in any political activities yourself?
Before the march, I hadn't really. So it was because I was quite young before this election cycle. And I think this election really kind of was a great passageway into the world of politics, which is really interesting. So,
have any of your family members, either conservative or liberal, participated in any kind of activist activities?
Not to my knowledge. I know that my father was against Vietnam. I think he probably went to a couple protests when he was a college student. But other than that, nothing that we really talk about quite often.
So, you've not participated in anything. This is the march was your first. Your first.
Yeah, it was.
Why did you want to march?
I just thought it would be a great way to express how I was feeling and the way I knew that my peers were feeling. We were all kind of afraid, and we didn't know how to express that, and we couldn't go vote or run ourselves. And we felt like we had very little say in what was going on, even though it impacted us so much. And I think marching was just a way for my voice to be heard, and just to say that I was there and that my opinion matters as well, and the opinion of my peers. And so kind of just marching to say that we deserve a place, kind of.
Once they announced the march, how quickly did you make the decision to actually go up to DC?
Once I heard about it, I knew immediately that I wanted to go, but obviously there was a lot of logistical stuff that we had to deal with. We wanted to take a plane up, but plane tickets were too expensive, and then we were thinking about driving, but that would take too long. And there was actually a point in time where we said that it might just be easier to not go at all, and we'll just stay home and then watch it on the TV or on the television. But it was really great. We had a friend who emailed us saying that there was this bus that had like 3 seats open for a reasonable price. So, and we took that as soon as possible, and I was so glad that we did. It was just an incredible experience.
So why did you choose the DC March rather than the Atlanta March?
I think the DC March, it was just so interesting because it brought people from all over the country together, and that was where, like, the headquarters kind of was. And I wanted to be in DC kind of, like, surrounded by everything going on and just be, like, on the front lines almost. And I thought that would be really an interesting experience, and it was, so.
Of all the issues, because there were lots of issues tied in with all of the marches, which issue was most important to you?
I mean, reproductive rights are kind of what I'm very passionate about. I haven't had to experience that yet, but I know that in the future, that's definitely something that I want to have available to me and that I want to make sure other women have available to them. And I think that's something that is just needs to be fought for and needs to be protected. And I think that's, that was kind of important.
Can you talk about the other issues that you saw like around you at the march, and how did you feel about all of those?
There were like a lot of different issues, not just related to women's issues, which is really interesting. So a lot of gay equality, LGBTQ community, like equal rights. Equal rights was a big part. Like everybody there was kind of just pushing that equal rights for everyone, which I mean makes sense to a lot of people, but to some I guess not. So there was a lot of that. Immigrants' rights was a big one. But yeah, the overarching theme was just equal rights, which is really cool.
Before the march, what were you actually expecting and hoping to get out of the experience?
I wasn't sure what to expect. I mean, I'd never done anything like that before. And I hadn't been alive to see a lot of big marches like that before. So I wasn't alive during the civil rights protests or Vietnam or anything like that. So this was the first kind of big collective march that I had even experienced in my life. And to know that I was going to be a part of that was so cool. I guess I was expecting kind of this feeling of togetherness and unity, and that was something that was really apparent. Like, you could almost sense, like, the spirit of people marching all over the world, and just knowing that you were all marching together as one was such an amazing feeling, so.
Well, I guess this is kind of like a moot question because your mom went with you, but were all of your friends and your family supportive of you going?
All of the people that were close to me were. I had a lot of friends who couldn't go, who were thrilled that I was going to be able to go and kind of march for them. My immediate family was really supportive of it. I mean, I had a couple people at my school who didn't think that marching would accomplish anything. And so they were kind of skeptic, and they were like, well, what's that going to accomplish? And I said, it's going to accomplish more than you think it will. And I think it did. It was really nice to go there and kind of prove them wrong, almost. But
did they admit that they'd be proven wrong?
No, obviously. They would never flat out say that. But you could kind of see that they saw there was a big impact that it had.
Talk about the group that you traveled with.
It was quite an interesting group of women. They were all very intelligent and very kind, and it was so incredible to be on a bus with them. They were very funny as well. I was the youngest on the bus, though. Most of the women were older, having careers and families and all that. But it was just very interesting to be surrounded by all those women who had had such interesting life experiences, and that definitely rubbed off on me. But it was just great to be there all as women, kind of. We had one guy on the bus who was the husband of one of the women, but he had a good time too. It was fun. But just all being together and being able to laugh together and talk about kind of why we were all marching and to share our stories was just really moving, I think.
So that was going on the whole way you were traveling up to DC. People were just having conversations with one another about...
And you'd hear conversations of the people around you, and you could just really get a sense for the mood in the bus. And it was,
Was the mood cheerful or excited? I mean, what kind of mood was it?
It was all very everybody was kind of anticipating the march, and we were all very excited, while also very tired. So it was definitely a happy mood. We had some bumps along the way, but we all still were in a great mood, I think. And so, yeah.
Can you describe the actual journey? So what time did you get picked up?
So my mother and one of her friends who was also on the bus, we took MARTA down to where they were meeting, which was another MARTA station. And we got there around like 5 o'clock, and then we all were there. We got t-shirts and talked and showed our posters to everybody else, took pictures and all that. But it wasn't until about 7 o'clock when we actually left. So we took off at 7, and it was smooth. We did have a fire in the bus. It was a small electrical fire, but definitely put a dent in the travel experience. But yeah, so after that, everything ran smoothly. But we stopped in South Carolina because we had to switch bus drivers. So we switched bus drivers, and then we continued. We stopped at a couple gas stations along the way just to go to the bathroom and get food and stretch and all that. But it was mainly just very long. I did sleep for a lot of it, I have to say. But yeah.
How were you feeling when you arrived?
Tired still, but I was kind of riding on this like high almost of just like excitement and finally being there. It wasn't like we got to park and then get off the bus and go. We had to stop in. We had something go on with our permit, and we weren't actually allowed to park in the designated parking spot. So that took quite a while to figure out, and that kind of, I think, drained some people of their energy. But once we got that all worked out and we got off the bus and we were like outside and we could see all the other buses and all the other people, I think everybody's spirits just got lifted once more, and it was kind of ready to go, kind of. But
can you describe the atmosphere when you like talk about getting to the rally and the like what you were seeing and how that made you feel?
Well, we walked, so we parked at an old stadium that I can't remember the name of, but we parked there, and then we had planned to take the metro from the stadium. Goodness, I keep smacking that. From the stadium to the march, which was on Independence and 3rd. But we ended up not taking the metro because we could not find it. But it was really nice. We walked from the parking lot all the way to Independence and 3rd, and it was really cool because it felt like its own little mini march. There were people driving by, honking their horns, like, supportively, and, like, you could hear women talking, and just seeing all these women who were so excited to go do something. Even though that wasn't the real march, it felt really cool to know that we were all going and we were all here for one purpose. That was really interesting. And then finally getting to the march, it was extremely chaotic, just trying to find your way, but it was kind of this like beautiful chaos, and just being surrounded again by that same atmosphere. It was very like excited and uplifting, and it was just, there were some people there who were kind of protesting us. We had a couple anti-abortion people along the way, some Trump supporters who kind of were trying to put a dent in the flow of the march. But I think...
Were they right in the middle of the crowd?
Some people were. We had one Trump supporter who, I think he tried to hit another Women's March protester. A women's marcher. But that was on the steps of a building, I believe. But most people were off to the sides kind of while we were marching. And I mean, they were there just to voice their opinions, and that's what we were there to do too. So we respected them, and they respected us. And there were hardly any people who really wanted to be there to kind of disrupt it. So that was kind of nice that we both had this mutual respect, even though we had different beliefs. Yeah.
What time did you arrive at the rally area?
I believe it was around 9 o'clock, I think.
Did you have like a 4-pack?
Yes.
Who was in your 4-pack?
So it was my mother, a friend of my mother's, Heather, and then one woman, Anne, and then another woman. And so it was it was the 5 of us. So we had a 5-pack. But yeah, it was really nice. We definitely bonded through that. Yeah, so we all tried to travel together and stay together as best we could. And just having like women around you who you knew was comforting, kind of, so you knew that you weren't alone, really.
Especially with these big crowds.
Yes, definitely.
Can you, there were lots of signs.
Yes.
Can you tell me, were there ones that you liked especially well?
I saw a lot of the signs that were pictures of women that said, like, "We the people" under them. They were these graphic prints. One woman in our 5-pack had one of them, and they were just so beautiful because it was showing so much diversity, and kind of how we were all one, even though we look different or we have different religions or different ethnicities. We all kind of have the same core values, and those were really beautiful signs. There was one sign that my friend had, who was also at the march, but I never saw her, which was "We're women, hear us roar," and I thought that was really fun, and that was really nice, kind of showing the power that women have. My goodness, there were just so many to keep track of. There were lots of creative ones as well. There were lots of ones with vaginas. Am I allowed to say that? Okay, yeah. For reproductive rights, obviously, which was interesting as well. But just the different signs were just really interesting to see. Definitely a sight to see. But they were all kind of preaching the same thing, which was that equal rights for everyone.
Did you have a pussy hat?
I did, yes. Oh my goodness. It was, so one woman on our bus, Anne, made them for, like, almost all the women. And they were really cute. They weren't the crocheted ones. They were like these kind of felt hats that were really cute as well. Yeah, there were so many pussy hats, I have to say. It was just a sea of pink, which was really awesome.
Now, I think your bus had clothing that you all,
yes.
Like, what did you have that helped you sort of identify one another?
So we had T-shirts that were just white, and then they said, like, Women's March, and then, like, Women's March on DC, and then Atlanta, so where we were from. And then we also had, like, sashes, like the suffragette sashes. So that was really cool. So we all kind of wore that, just so it would be easy to spot one another. Being how short I am, it didn't help me much, trying to look over the crowd and find a person in a white T-shirt. But that was nice, and again, it was kind of like a symbol of unity, and how many, like, smaller groups were a part of this one large group was really awesome.
Did you think that because some people talked about the pussy hats as being silly, and frivolous, mm-hmm. But did you see a power in the fact that women
definitely. it was kind of to say, we're all one. This is something that's, like, important to us. And, of course, they were kind of silly, you might say. They definitely weren't incredibly fashionable. But it got a point across that we were all one and that we would take something that was not empowering and that was really awful to hear and make it empowering for us. And so this word that people use in a derogative way and in a sexist way, we were going to use as a word to empower us. And so, yeah, they were kind of silly, but the purpose of them was not. So.
What sign did you have?
I had one poster, but it had two different signs. So on one side it said, our bodies, our minds, our freedom. And then on the other side it said, girls just want to have fundamental rights. So yeah, I definitely swapped from those every now and then. Yeah, so.
Did your arms get tired holding them up?
I mean, sometimes. But it's weird, you don't really get tired because of all the energy that's there. And, like, if you do get, like, tired, you just look around and you're, like, you just feel this energy kind of overcome you. And then suddenly you're not tired anymore.
What were your favorite chants? Because there were a lot of chants.
Yes, there were. I liked Can't Build a Wall, Hands Too Small. I thought there were lots of tiny hand chants. There's We Don't Want Your Tiny Hands Anywhere Near Our Underpants. So those were like the more fun ones that I heard. And then there's the like classic Our Bodies or Our Choice. But they were just like, my goodness, there were so many. Again, similar with the signs. Yeah, I really...
Did you feel comfortable just chanting along with everyone?
Definitely. It was kind of strange when you first start a chant and there's only like 3 people. It kind of takes a little gut to go out and be the next voice. But once you get this entire group of people saying one message and like sending it out and shouting it, you don't care about your one voice anymore. You realize that all these collective voices are one voice, and you're kind of a part of that. So that was just really cool. And then again, it's also kind of awkward to be one of the last ones chanting when you're transitioning chants and you're kind of behind.
Now, I went to the same organisational meeting that you went to, and the organisers were talking about the importance of hydrating throughout the day.
Yes.
Did you manage to stay hydrated? How did you keep yourself?
There's a fine line between drinking too little water and too much water. There were not bathrooms readily available to us, so that was definitely something you had to keep in mind, was staying hydrated but not so hydrated that you need to go to the bathroom all the time. But I think I did a good job of staying hydrated and making sure that I was staying energized and not pushing my body too much, because that was important, just making sure that you were comfortable and that your body had everything it needed to continue marching. So.
Did you have to use the portaloos at any time?
I did.
How was that?
They weren't awful. We tried to find ones that hadn't been used very often, and we never had to use a porta potty while on the march. Surprisingly, there weren't a lot of porta potties in the city, which is kind of disappointing. There were long lines to like Starbucks bathrooms and all that. There was one incident where I had to use the bathroom really bad, and we actually found a church that was letting women come in, and it was quite funny because you had like priests all dressed up, and then you had women coming in with like pro-abortion signs. But it was this mutual respect and knowing that we were here to voice our opinions and they were completely fine with that. And that was really cool to have them welcome us into their place of worship, and just kind of just accept us, and let us use the bathroom. So yeah, that was nice.
Were you able to hear any of the speakers?
I was not, sadly. We were actually behind the stage, so we could not see what was going on at the stage, because there was a big curtain up. So I wasn't able to hear any of the speakers. I did go on Snapchat, though, later that day, and there were videos of some of the speakers talking, so I was able to see that. But it wasn't that important to me that I missed the speakers, because I was really just there to march, and that's what we were all there to do, kind of, and we were all able to do that. So,
when you went to Snapchat and had a look at the speeches, were there any that stood out to you as being just wonderful or awful? I mean,
I saw Bernie Sanders' speech, which he didn't speak at the Washington one, I don't think. But his speech was really moving, and I liked that a lot. I was never able to see entire clips of the speeches, but from the clips that I saw, they were all really great and really empowering and really well thought out, kind of. So,
there were policemen there.
yes.
Can you describe your interaction with the law enforcement officers?
They were all very kind, that I saw. They were glad to see us, I think. Not yay, protesters, but there were definitely, we saw some women police officers who were there, and they kind of were clapping us on, and that was cool to see. But it was surprising how many law enforcement officers were actually there cheering us on. I remember on our way from the parking lot, or from the stadium to Independence and 3rd, there were a lot of police officers helping traffic move and stuff, and they were all incredibly supportive, and they weren't there to bring us down or to cause any kind of chaos, really. They were just there to do their job, which was to protect and serve, and they did a great job of that. So,
probably this was the next day that you were checking this out, but what did you think about the coverage in the media?
Yeah, so I did not see a lot of coverage, actually, because once we got back, I slept most of the day again. But I was talking to my dad, and because he stayed home and he was watching the whole thing on the news, and he said there was just so much coverage, and it was really awesome. One thing though that we noticed was that there weren't a ton of aerial photos of Washington D.C., and I was kind of bummed about that because I really wanted to see this sea of pink and how far it went and just all the people there. I thought that would have definitely been something interesting to have. But I think we got a good amount of coverage, and we definitely sparked up a conversation among the news outlets. So that was really cool.
Back to the march, you were in a five pack. How did you? There were a lot of people there.
Yes.
How did you manage to stay together?
Well, if we were moving against the crowd, we would all kind of hold on to each other's backpacks. So that was really handy, especially when we were trying to cut through a moving crowd, which is not the easiest thing to do. Oh goodness, I keep kicking that table. We also had a call that we would, that was just a silly little thing. It's pack! And so whenever we were, like, missing somebody, we would just go, back, and try to find them. And then if it was, like, one person, you would just kind of yell out their name. And they were never far, really, so. But we never lost anybody, which was great, so.
It could have been easy.
It was very easy to lose somebody, but thankfully we didn't.
Were there any, thinking back on it, were there any moments that just really stand out to you as being, like, very impactful, you know?
There was one, so we were in front of the White House, and so we were there for a couple minutes, kind of just in front of the White House, taking all that in, because that was really something to be there. In any other occasion, I think it would have been something really cool to see, but being in front of the White House at that moment was almost somber, and everybody there was almost mourning in a way. But we were walking back to the metro from the White House, and we saw this, like, small group of anti-abortion college students, and they were, like, chanting and doing their thing, holding up their signs, but they were just drowned out by the rest of the crowd, chanting, like, my body, my choice, and all different kinds of things, and it was peaceful, but it was still very resistant, and showing that we were here, and the majority of us believe this, and our voices are important, and that was really cool to see. And then we also walked in front of the new Trump Hotel in DC, which was quite a sight. There were lots of people there. I think that's mainly where a lot of people who were really frustrated and were really angry, they were able to go there and kind of shout and yell and just express themselves. And there were a lot of people there yelling shame, some people flipping off the building. There was one point when police officers tried to come out of the hotel, and I think they were trying to get people to move, but they just got, like, drowned out, and they just went back inside. And that was definitely a tense kind of place to be in, because you could just see how angry people were, and especially in front of this, like, building with his name slashed over it. That was kind of a tense moment, but it was something that I really thought I needed to see, because it showed me how many people were just angry and how they didn't really know what to do with that anger, and that was their best way to express that anger.
Did you feel emotional at any time throughout the day?
I typically don't get very emotional about stuff. I hardly ever cry. But there was definitely this emotional connection, and just being in that crowd definitely had an impact on you. There were points when I thought that I might cry, but I never did.
What were these points?
Just when, like, so kind of like separating yourself from the crowd and, like, almost looking down and just knowing that you are a part of this, and that there are, like, 3 million people around the world who are all standing with you in spirit, and knowing that this awful thing happened, but we're not just going to sit idly by and do nothing. And so just almost like removing yourself from your body and just looking up and being like, whoa. That was definitely really cool. Yeah.
The day after the march.
Oh, yeah.
How did you feel?
I was still riding on this kind of like high, this like energy, and I felt so motivated. I wanted to find other ways to work with that organization and to make sure that my voice was heard. And it was just really awesome because I was able to talk with one of my friends who had gone to the march, and we were just sharing our experiences. So it was still very, almost like you were still there, because it was still very fresh. Yeah, but of course I did sleep again, because we were still kind of tired from being there all day and marching all day, being on your feet. So.
Can you talk about the journey back? What the mood was like compared to the mood on the way up? How the mood was like on the way back?
Yeah. There were a lot of people just talking about what they had seen and how moving it was for them. And like on the way up, we were all talking about what we were kind of like expecting, and then to have the journey back to talk about what actually happened was really cool. And there were lots of discussions on the bus on the way back home about what next to do. Because I think that was a big thing that everybody was talking about. We marched, but now what's the next step? And so we talked about that a lot, which is really awesome. So it was still that kind of like excited mood, because we were still like in awe almost that we were actually there. But it was now kind of a more important, like, what next kind of feeling.
In the sort of the days and the weeks since the march, how have you been feeling?
I mean, every time that I feel like I don't have a way to express myself or that my voice isn't being heard, I can like think back to the march and be like, well, there are like 3 million other people around the world who are feeling the same way. And there are ways for my voice to be heard, which is nice. It's like a reference, kind of. And being able to share that experience with my peers, especially the ones who were kind of skeptical, and who didn't think that it would be anything important, it was really cool to be able to share my experience with them and to see how eager everyone was to hear about it. Because I was showing one of my friends some photos that I had taken, and within a matter of seconds, the entire class was just like all huddled around my phone, wanting to see kind of like what it was like to be there firsthand, wanting to hear stories. And that was really cool to know that so many people were so supportive and so eager to learn about what it was like. And it was very hopeful.
The family members who are conservative, did you talk to them about the fact you're marching?
Not really. I think they had known that we were marching, but we never really had big discussions about why we were marching or the logistical stuff or anything like that. Plus, most of that, my dad's side of the family live further away from us, so we aren't able to see them as often. But it's still, like, it was nice to know that we could talk about that with them, and I'm sure that we could. And they would be wanting to hear about it, I think. Because even though we have different political views, we're still a family, we still love one another. So to know that might not have been something that they would have done, but they were still proud, kind of, that we, like my mother and I, had the courage to go and voice our opinions. And they kind of knew that if they wanted to do something similar, we would be just as supportive, kind of.
Were there any people, when you got back and you were talking about your experiences, did you get any pushback from any of your peers or anybody, any adults?
Not really, no. Again, I live in Decatur, which is quite a liberal little bubble. So there weren't a lot of people there who were outwardly opposed to that. It was a lot of people just wanting to hear about it, wanting to learn more. And I think living in a bubble is kind of, definitely has its pros, but it does have cons to it as well. Being able to share that experience and having people be eager to learn about it and hear about it, I think was definitely a pro, to know that we all kind of have this same belief. We all have the same core values, even though there are minor differences among us. But yeah, that was really cool.
So now you're back,
Yeah.
and you've been thinking about it. What do you plan to do?
I definitely am trying to get more involved in politics. Being that I'm so young, it's more difficult, especially trying to find summer programs or summer internships is a lot more difficult than if I were a high school student or a college student. But I think that I could use it to my advantage, being that I'm so young, that I can kind of represent other people who are even younger than me, and I definitely want to try to do something. I've given my email to one woman who works with a lot of like other women's marchers and women activist groups, to see if she can find anything for me. I've tried to get internship programs at City Hall, working a lot at the local level, because I know how important that is. But yeah, so I'm still trying, but it's definitely more difficult. There aren't as many opportunities out there.
But you can vote the next election.
I can. I'm incredibly excited. A lot of my friends won't be able to, which is really sad. But I have a couple friends who are all going to be able to vote as well. And we're just so excited to finally be part of the voter demographic and to actually have a vote and have a say in who our president is going to be. And I just can't wait. So I'm really excited about that.
Do you think your generation will turn out in force at the polls?
I think so, because we saw what happened this election cycle, and it really was frustrating that we didn't have a voice, and that our voice really feels it's really important to be heard, but there's no way for us to really vote or express that. I mean, who wants to listen to a couple kids? So I think that in the next election cycle, we'll all remember what happened in this election and take that frustration and that passion and all of our emotion and make sure that we turn out for the next election and make sure that what happened this time doesn't happen again.
What do you envision, like, considering, like, every day there's new things happening?
Mm-hmm.
What do you hope? Do you have hopes for what might happen in the next year or the next 2 years?
Definitely. I hope that more young people get involved. Because if we get people my age and people who are going to be voting the next election involved, and to let them know that they have an opinion and that their opinion matters, and that I think that's really important. And I kind of have this hope that it will bring us together more. And you can already see how that's happening, is these groups of people who are frustrated and angry, and they're all coming out and trying so desperately to make sure that their voices are heard and that their rights are secured. And so that's definitely a hope, is that it's able to bring us together, and we're able to use this president as something that brings us together and not allow him to divide us. So.
What's your biggest fear?
I mean, there are so many things to be afraid of, really. I'm afraid that we will normalize this. I think that's my biggest fear, is that people will become used to this and find it to be the new normal. And so when outrageous things happen, it won't impact us as much. And that people will start to lose the motivation and the energy that they had throughout these 4 years, and that they just stop wanting to go out and protest and just let what's happening happen. And then when we do that, I think that's really, it's really awful, because we're saying that we're almost agreeing with what's going on. So I think it's definitely important for the media not to normalize what's going on, because it's not normal. And we need people to understand that it's not normal, and that we won't let this become the new normal. And especially with the younger generation growing up with this, they might just it's all that they know, and they might find that normal. Definitely when I was growing up and having 8 years of the Obama administration, that's all that I knew. That was normal. It was almost normal to have an African American president, because in my lifetime there were as many, I didn't live through as many white president administrations. And kind of seeing America as this progressive country was normal to me. And so I'm kind of afraid for young people looking up to this president and seeing the things that he does and just accepting it as normal. And when they watch the media, how it's covered like anything else would be covered. So that's the big thing, is that this becomes normalized and it starts having less and less of an impact on us.
So do you have plans to continue to support the mission of the march? Are you going to attend future marches, rallies, or what?
Definitely, I would love to. Well, the Women's March just came out with their newest idea, which is a day without women, on International Women's Day, which is kind of a strike almost, to show how important women are and how part of the community they are. And I would definitely love to take part in that, although I would be missing school. So, I mean, it's kind of like women's education also, advocating for that by going to school. But I definitely am looking forward to being a part of more marches and more group organizations. But what I really want is to be a part of an organization where I'm able to make a difference, kind of, and not just being a marcher, but being a part of an organization, or having a seat at the table, kind of knowing that, kind of advocating for myself and for my peers and for younger people. That's really what I would hope to have.
Can you think of any organizations that you could get involved with?
Off the top of my head, it's difficult, but being a part of the Women's March organization would definitely be important, because that's such a group. It's a group of such strong and powerful women, and I would really hope to get more involved in government, especially this is the first election cycle that I've actually been old enough to understand what's going on and to be a part of it. It's gotten me really interested in politics, and possibly something I'd want to do in the future. So I'd really hope to get involved in government more. But I would definitely be interested in volunteering at organizations, anything like that, kind of just making sure that I'm doing good and I'm advocating for women and for myself.
Do you think that the movement as it is can maintain its momentum?
I hope that it does. I definitely think that it has the potential to, but it's really about what individual women believe. You can have a group of people who are so motivated and who are so ready to get something done, but if the majority of that group isn't going to do anything about it, then nothing really gets done. So I think it's important that the message stays the way it is and that we all make sure we're fighting and we know what cause we're fighting for is important. Because jumping from issue to issue, it can be tiring, and it can drive people away, I think. So I think it's important to have a strong sense of purpose and to be welcoming to people who are maybe skeptical of it and try to invite them in and show them what we're doing, and to get younger people especially so that this movement is lasts through the generations is really important, I think.
Is there anything about, looking back, was there anything that surprised you about the march and about the aftermath of the march? You know, either your experiences or speakers or people you met or anything?
It surprised me that the president did not come out and comment on the march, or at least tweet about it. And that kind of hurt almost. It was disappointing because we were here, we marched the entire day. There were 3 million people around the world who were marching, and he never came out to say, "Don't worry." He never comforted us. And that's really all that we wanted, was to hear him say, "I hear you, and I'm going to try to look out for you." But he didn't. And that's surprising.
I think he tweeted a kind of snide thing, like, why didn't you turn up at the polls then?
And I mean, well, we did. I mean, you lost the popular vote. So there were 3 million more Americans who voted for not somebody else and not you. And so it was all, I think a lot of those people who felt disenfranchised and who felt like their vote didn't count because of what state they live in, they showed up definitely, because they were angry and they didn't know what to do. And it was definitely disappointing, and I mean, I didn't have much respect for him to begin with, but that just made me lose respect in him even more, to see that he wasn't even strong enough to come out and to say that he heard us at least. Because we were there to be heard. And we were heard by many people. Definitely lots of politicians who saw how scared that we were. But to know that he didn't see that was definitely surprising and disappointing. And it's not something that you'd think a president would do, is to tweet something about these protesters coming out and to not even say that he hears their concerns. Yeah, that was really surprising.
Since you've gotten back from the march and we have a new administration, what are your thoughts about the government's activities?
I mean, it's scary. To have a CNN alert pop up like every hour about what's going on, and it's really overwhelming, I think, and I think that that's their objective, is to overwhelm us and to do so much that we don't have enough time to react. And that's definitely been, it's scary how fast things are happening, and to know that we have a Republican-run Congress that is probably going to agree with most of what the president's saying, and that's definitely scary to know that things are going to be able to get done so rapidly. and especially long-lasting things. But knowing that the population is not going to just sit by, and I mean, we saw with the immigration ban how many people turned out and how effective that was, and how the judicial court ruled against that. And so I think as long as we keep resisting, and as long as we make sure that we don't normalize stuff like this, I think that's mainly what's important. But of course it's scary to know that so much stuff can happen in so little time. So,
and this kind of falls on to pretty much what you've been talking about. Like, what strategies do you suggest people who are fearful or like concerned, how do they cope moving forward?
I mean, it's definitely important that you don't just sit on the television and say, man, somebody's got to do something about this. Like, be that person who does something about it. And I think that's definitely an issue with a lot of people, is they see other people who are already out there protesting, but eventually those people are going to get tired, and they might see that if nobody else is there with them, they're just going to lose hope. And so it's important that as much as we talk, we take action as well. And even if it's small action that you can do, just to communicate with people and to kind of start conversations across the aisle, I think is important, to make sure that we have allies on the other side, kind of, is important. So yeah, just not losing hope is really important, and perseverance, like persevering through these 4 years are going to be really tough. Well, we'll see if it's 4 years. But it's going to be tough, and it's going to take strong people and motivated people. And so I think as long as we keep giving people a reason to be motivated, and we keep showing them what they can do, because a lot of times people want to get involved, but they don't know how to. And I think it's really important for these big organizations like the Women's March to show people what they can do, whether it's small or whether it's on a larger scale. It's important to let them know that they have options and that they can get involved. So,
a final question: if somebody is planning to go to another march in Washington, what piece of advice would you give them, either practical or emotional or whatever?
Yeah. I would definitely tell them to be in that moment, and to step back every now and then and think about what's actually happening and how lucky we are to live in a country where we're able to do this. Because there are places where if 700,000 women showed up trying to march and protest, it would not turn out well. So I would tell them to be grateful, definitely, but to still want to be there and make sure that our voices are heard. And to not settle, really. But again, it's really important that you just take yourself out of the moment every now and then, and you just reflect on what's happening. That's just so powerful when you do that. So I think that's definitely something that I would tell them to do, is definitely be in the moment and go with the flow and just do what comes naturally. But every now and then, just think and reflect and look around and take it all in would be really awesome.
That's great. Are there any last thoughts that you have?
No. I mean, I think that about covers it.
Cool. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you
for
so
being
much.
interviewed. That was wonderful.